My name is Tina Sanchez, 33 years old, and until last month, I was a senior partnership executive at FinTech Solutions, a prestigious software company. For 10 years, I built and nurtured our relationship with GlobalBank, our $173 million client. Then our new CEO, Marcus Wright, called me into his office. His exact words still ring in my ears. "You're just a line on my budget." While I share how my career imploded and then dramatically reversed, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and subscribe to join my resilience journey. When I started at FinTech Solutions a decade ago, I was fresh out of business school with nothing but ambition and student loans. The company was still finding its footing in the financial technology sector, but I saw its potential. Our software solutions streamlined banking operations and secured financial transactions in ways competitors couldn't match. What we lacked in market share, we made up for with innovation and personalized service. My role began in account management, but I quickly proved myself by securing smaller banking clients and nurturing those relationships. By year 3, I had my sights set on GlobalBank, a financial giant that would transform our company's trajectory if we could win their business. GlobalBank wasn't just any client. With branches across 40 states and expanding international operations, landing their business would put FinTech Solutions on the map. The potential contract value, $173 million over 5 years. It would become the cornerstone of our company's growth strategy. The courtship was intense. For 18 months, I led our team through countless presentations, security audits, and negotiations. I spent more time at GlobalBank's headquarters than my own apartment. That's when I met Elizabeth Morgan, their chief operations officer, a brilliant woman with piercing blue eyes and a reputation for being impossible to please. Elizabeth and I connected immediately. Both of us were women in male-dominated fields, both detail-oriented perfectionists who valued authenticity over corporate politics. Our professional relationship gradually evolved into friendship. We'd discuss contract terms over lunch, then share stories about our families over coffee. This personal connection became the bedrock of our business relationship. After nearly 2 years of effort, we secured the contract. The celebration at FinTech was legendary, with our CEO Thomas Reynolds personally acknowledging my contribution. "Tina didn't just open a door," he said, raising his glass. "She built the entire house." That night, Thomas promised me that my position would be secure as long as GlobalBank remained our client. For 7 years, the partnership flourished. I visited GlobalBank headquarters weekly, addressing issues before they became problems, suggesting software improvements based on their feedback, and ensuring their operations ran smoothly. Elizabeth and I became each other's trusted advisors. "You're the only vendor who treats us like actual humans," she once told me. Then everything changed. Thomas announced his retirement last year. The board conducted an extensive search for his replacement, eventually selecting Marcus Wright, an executive from our competitor, known for aggressive cost-cutting measures and maximizing shareholder value. From day one, Marcus made it clear that FinTech Solutions would be undergoing a transformation. "We're leaving money on the table," he declared in his first company-wide meeting. "Every expense must be justified by direct revenue contribution." The atmosphere shifted immediately. Team lunches disappeared. Travel budgets were slashed. Quarterly reviews became interrogations about productivity metrics. My first one-on-one meeting with Marcus set the tone for our relationship. When I explained the resources needed to maintain our GlobalBank relationship, he scoffed. "That's an excessive amount of hand-holding for one client," he said, barely looking up from his spreadsheet. "I need to see efficiency improvements here." I left his office with a knot in my stomach. My colleague Rachel Chen caught me in the hallway, noting my expression. "That bad, huh?" she asked. Rachel had been my closest work friend since I joined the company. She managed several smaller banking clients and understood the delicate nature of client relationships. "He doesn't get it," I confided. "GlobalBank isn't just any client. The relationship we've built goes beyond the contract." Rachel's expression grew serious. "Be careful, Tina. I've heard rumors about an upcoming restructuring, significant cuts." I brushed off her concern. "I'm not worried. GlobalBank is our biggest client. They'd never touch my position. Looking back, my confidence was built on promises from the previous leadership promises that meant nothing to Marcus Wright. In his world, every employee was reducible to a number on a balance sheet, a line item that could be erased to improve the quarterly report. I was about to learn just how disposable 10 years of relationship building could be in the eyes of someone who only valued the bottom line. The morning that changed everything started normally enough. I arrived at the office early as usual, planning to prepare for an afternoon call with GlobalBank's technical team about an upcoming system upgrade. My inbox was filled with the typical Monday messages, nothing indicating the bombshell that was about to drop. At 9:30, my phone rang. "Tina, Marcus would like to see you in his office," said his executive assistant, her voice carefully neutral. I grabbed my notebook, assuming this was about the quarterly review presentation I had submitted the previous week. Marcus's office occupied the corner space previously belonging to Thomas, but the similarities ended there. Where Thomas had filled the room with photos of company events and client meetings, Marcus's space was sparse, dominated by multiple monitors displaying various performance metrics and stock prices. "Take a seat," he said, without looking up from his computer. I perched on the edge of the chair across from his desk, waiting. The silence stretched uncomfortably until he finally turned his attention to me, his expression unreadable. "Tina, I've been reviewing our organizational structure and identifying areas for optimization." He began, his tone clinically detached. "After careful analysis, I've determined that your position represents an unnecessary expense." I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "I'm sorry." "You're being let go," he clarified, sliding a folder across the desk. "Your responsibilities will be distributed among our account management team. We can achieve the same outcomes with more efficient resource allocation." My mind raced to make sense of what was happening. But GlobalBank? I'm their primary contact. We have weekly meetings, ongoing projects. Marcus cut me off with a dismissive wave. "Clients adapt. It's a standard business procedure to reassign accounts." "This isn't just any account," I protested, my voice rising slightly. "We've built this relationship over 10 years. Elizabeth Morgan specifically." "You're just a line on my budget," he interrupted, the words landing like a physical blow. "A particularly expensive line that I can't justify to shareholders. We're implementing a leaner client management model across the board." The room seemed to tilt slightly as the reality sank in. 10 years of dedication. Countless nights and weekends, relationships I had carefully nurtured. All reduced to a budgetary decision made by someone who had been with the company less than 6 months. "The terms of your separation are outlined in the folder," Marcus continued, already turning back to his computer screen. "Jason from HR will walk you through the details." As if on cue, the door opened, and Jason Parker entered. The new HR director was another of Marcus's hires, known for his efficiency in workforce reductions. "Please come with me, Tina," Jason said, gesturing toward the door. In a daze, I followed him to a small conference room where he methodically explained my severance package. 3 months' salary, continued health benefits for 30 days, and a non-disparagement agreement I would need to sign to receive the payments. "You'll need to turn in your company phone, laptop, and badge before leaving the building," Jason instructed. "Company policy requires that you exit immediately. Someone from security will accompany you to collect your personal belongings." Today, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't even transition my accounts. Say goodbye to my team." "It's standard procedure," Jason replied without emotion. "Prevents disruption." I felt like I was watching the scene from outside my body as I signed the necessary papers. The security guard who appeared to escort me was Dave, who had greeted me every morning for the past decade. He couldn't meet my eyes as he followed me to my desk. My hands trembled as I placed personal items into a cardboard box, framed photos, a few books, the award I'd received for securing the GlobalBank contract. Colleagues watched from behind their monitors, their faces a mixture of sympathy and relief that they had been spared. I thought about GlobalBank, about Elizabeth. They had no idea what was happening. I needed to call her to explain, but my company phone had already been deactivated. My laptop requested a password that had already been reset. In the span of 30 minutes, my professional identity had been completely severed. Rachel appeared beside me, risking Marcus's disapproval by openly associating with the newly fired. "This is insane," she whispered, helping me pack. "What about all your clients? What about GlobalBank?" "Apparently they'll adapt." I repeated Marcus's cold assessment, fighting back tears. "Let me walk you out," Rachel offered, ignoring the pointed stares from management. As we approached the elevators, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass doors. Pale, shocked, clutching a pathetic box of desk plants and coffee mugs. 10 years of my professional life, reduced to objects that fit in a single container. "I'll call you," Rachel promised, as the elevator doors opened. "This isn't right." The descent to the lobby felt symbolic. A rapid fall from the career I had built. Dave, the security guard, maintained an uncomfortable silence until we reached the ground floor. "For what it's worth, Miss Sanchez, I think they're making a huge mistake," he said quietly as he escorted me to the exit. "You've always been one of the good ones." I nodded, unable to form words, and stepped out into the bright morning sunlight. Just 2 hours after arriving at work, I was standing on the sidewalk, unemployed, holding the physical remnants of my career with no idea what would happen next. The week after being fired passed in a blur of shock and disbelief. I fluctuated between anger, humiliation, and anxiety about my future. Each morning I woke up momentarily forgetting, then the reality would crash down anew. 10 years of my life gone in an instant. My identity had been so intertwined with my role at FinTech that I struggled to define myself without it. I mechanically went through the motions of updating my resume and reaching out to my network. Former colleagues sent sympathetic messages, but most kept their distance, afraid of jeopardizing their own positions. Rachel called daily, sharing that the office atmosphere had grown even more tense, with everyone wondering who would be next. "They've assigned 3 different account managers to handle GlobalBank," she reported. "None of them have any history with Elizabeth or her team. It's a mess." I felt a pang of vindication mixed with genuine concern. GlobalBank wasn't just a client to me. The people there were colleagues I respected and cared about. I had tried calling Elizabeth several times using my personal phone, but only reached her voicemail. I left messages explaining what had happened, but received no response. On the 8th day after my termination, while I was half-heartedly scrolling through job listings, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Tina Sanchez," I answered professionally, hoping it might be a recruiter. "Tina, it's Elizabeth Morgan." The familiar voice sent a wave of relief through me. What the hell is happening over there? I've been trying to get a straight answer for days. Elizabeth the First breathed, sitting up straighter. "I'm so sorry about the confusion. I was going to keep trying to reach you." "I just found out you were fired," she interrupted, her voice tight with anger. "And do you know how I discovered this? Through an automated email introducing someone named Kevin as our new dedicated relationship manager. No explanation, no transition plan, nothing." I winced, imagining how poorly that must have been received. I wasn't allowed to contact clients directly. They escorted me out the same day. "This is unacceptable," Elizabeth fumed. "We've worked together for years. You know every aspect of our operations, every customization of our system. Some random account manager can't possibly step in and understand the complexity of what we've built." Her loyalty warmed me, even as I recognized the professional frustration behind it. I tried to explain that to Marcus, the new CEO, but he wasn't interested in the relationship aspect. "Well, he's about to get very interested," Elizabeth replied, her voice taking on the steely quality I recognized from tough negotiations. "I've already spoken to our procurement team and legal department. We're freezing all payments to FinTech Solutions effective immediately." My heart skipped. The entire contract, the GlobalBank deal, was worth $173 million over 5 years, with approximately 2 years remaining. The entire thing, she confirmed. Almost 70 million still outstanding. Our agreement has specific provisions about service continuity and relationship management. The indemnity clause, I murmured suddenly, remembering a provision I had never expected to come into play. Exactly, Elizabeth said. Section 12.4, which specifically names you as the primary relationship manager for the duration of the contract. Any change requires mutual written agreement between GlobalBank and FinTech Solutions. Early in our negotiations, years ago, Elizabeth had insisted on adding this unusual clause. At the time, I had been flattered but didn't think much of it. Such personalized provisions were rare but not unheard of when relationships were central to service delivery. Thomas had agreed without hesitation, seeing it as a testament to the trust we had built. Our legal team is reviewing the contract now, Elizabeth continued. The penalty clauses for material breach are significant. As if on cue, my phone beeped with another incoming call. The caller ID showed Andrew Wilson, FinTech's Chief Legal Officer. Elizabeth I, need to call you back. FinTech's legal team is calling me right now. Perfect timing, she said with grim satisfaction. I'll be in touch, Tina. I switched calls, my hands slightly trembling. Hello, Andrew. Tina Andrews' usually composed voice sounded strained. We have an urgent situation developing with GlobalBank. I need you to come to the office as soon as possible. I'm no longer an employee, Andrew, I reminded him. Security escorted me out last week, remember? I'm well aware, he replied tersely. But we have a serious contract issue that requires your immediate input. A car will pick you up in 30 minutes. Please be ready. The call ended before I could respond. I sat motionless for a moment, trying to process this sudden reversal. After treating me like a disposable budget item, they now needed me urgently enough to send a car. A small vindictive part of me wanted to refuse to let them stew in whatever problem they'd created. But curiosity won out, along with a desire to see firsthand the consequences of Marcus's short-sighted decision. I changed into my best business attire, the outfit I'd worn to close the GlobalBank deal years ago. Whatever was happening, I wanted to face it with dignity. Exactly 30 minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up outside my apartment building. The driver opened the door without a word, and I slipped into the back seat, noticing Andrew already waiting inside. Thank you for coming, he said, his expression grave. GlobalBank has frozen all payments and is threatening to terminate the entire contract with penalties. Their legal team contacted us this morning citing breach of material terms. Section 12.4. I stated, unable to keep a hint of satisfaction from my voice. Andrew's eyebrows rose slightly. You remember the specific clause? I remember everything about that contract, Andrew. I lived and breathed it for years. He nodded slowly. Then you understand why we need you in this meeting. The financial implications are catastrophic. As the car navigated through traffic toward the FinTech offices, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Vindication, anxiety, and a small flicker of something that felt dangerously like hope. The company that had discarded me so easily was now facing a crisis of their own making, and I appeared to be the only one who could resolve it. The question was, did I want to? The atmosphere in FinTech's main conference room crackled with tension when I entered. Around the massive table sat the company's entire executive leadership team, their faces uniformly grim. Marcus Wright occupied the head of the table, his usual confident demeanor noticeably absent. Beside him, Andrew Wilson shuffled through papers with nervous energy. Across the table sat three unfamiliar individuals in impeccable suits. GlobalBank's legal team, I presumed. The woman in the center with silver-framed glasses and an impressive stack of documents had to be Diane Foster, GlobalBank's legendary chief counsel. All conversations stopped when I walked in. Several executives whom I had known for years couldn't meet my eyes. Miss Sanchez, thank you for joining us. Andrew said formally, gesturing to an empty chair directly opposite Marcus. "We appreciate your willingness to help resolve this situation." I took my seat without acknowledging Marcus, focusing instead on Diane Foster, who was watching me with evident interest. "Miss Sanchez, I'm Diane Foster, Chief Legal Officer for GlobalBank," she confirmed my assumption, extending her hand across the table. "While we haven't met personally, Elizabeth Morgan speaks very highly of you." "Thank you, Miss Foster," I replied, shaking her hand firmly. "I value my relationship with Elizabeth and the entire GlobalBank team." "Let's get straight to the point," Marcus interrupted, his voice tight. "We have a contractual misunderstanding that needs clarification." Diane Foster's eyebrow arched sharply. "This is considerably more than a misunderstanding, Mr. Wright. It's a clear breach of Section 12.4 of our Master Service Agreement, which constitutes a material breach of the entire contract." She slid a document across the table. A copy of the GlobalBank contract opened to the page containing what I had mentally dubbed the Tina Clause years ago. "Let me read the relevant section," Diane continued, her voice taking on the precise cadence of a courtroom presentation. Section 12.4. "For the duration of this agreement, Tina Sanchez shall serve as the primary relationship manager and direct point of contact for all matters pertaining to implementation, service delivery, and ongoing maintenance of services described herein. Any change to this arrangement must be mutually agreed upon in writing by authorized representatives of both GlobalBank and FinTech Solutions." She looked up, fixing Marcus with an unwavering stare. "Furthermore, Section 18.2 states that any material breach of the terms set forth in Sections 10 through 15 entitles GlobalBank to immediately suspend all payments and seek financial remedies up to $50 million in 2CIN, addition to termination of the agreement without penalty." The conference room fell completely silent. I could practically hear the calculations running through everyone's minds. $70 million in suspended payments, $50 million in potential penalties, plus the incalculable cost of losing their most prestigious client. $120 million at risk, because Marcus had decided I was an unnecessary expense. Marcus's face had drained of color. "This is unusual," he finally managed. "Contracts don't typically name specific employees as essential personnel." "This one does," Diane replied simply. "And GlobalBank takes its contracts very seriously, Mr. Wright. Elizabeth Morgan insisted on this specific provision because of the trust and relationship built with Miss Sanchez. Your company agreed to these terms. Your predecessor understood their value." One of the board members, Harold Jenkins, spoke up for the first time. "Marcus, did you review the GlobalBank contract before terminating Miss Sanchez's position?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I reviewed a summary of our major contracts. This specific clause wasn't highlighted in the executive summary. Because it was considered untouchable," Andrew muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. Harold's face darkened. "So you terminated a key employee specifically named in our largest contract, without reviewing the actual terms of that contract?" Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it, clearly recognizing there was no good answer. Harold turned to me, his expression a mixture of embarrassment and desperation. "Tina, we've clearly made a terrible mistake. We need your help to rectify this situation." I remained silent, watching the drama unfold. After being unceremoniously discarded witnessing, their panic gave me a satisfaction I wasn't proud of but couldn't deny. Diane Foster cleared her throat. "GlobalBank values its relationship with FinTech Solutions. Your software is deeply integrated into our operations. However, that relationship was built largely through Ms. Sanchez's consistent efforts and understanding of our needs." She closed the contract folder deliberately. "Our position is simple. Either Ms. Sanchez is reinstated as our primary contact as specified in the contract, or we will consider FinTech in breach and proceed accordingly." All eyes turned to me. The power dynamics in the room had shifted dramatically. 1 week ago, I had been summarily dismissed as a budget line item. Now I represented the difference between stability and potential financial disaster for the company. Marcus finally addressed me directly, his voice strained into something approximating politeness. "Tina, obviously there's been a significant oversight. We'd like to offer you your position back effective immediately, with a suitable compensation adjustment to reflect your importance to the organization." I looked at him steadily, remembering his dismissive words. The humiliation of being escorted out by security. The callous way he had reduced my decade of service to a line on a spreadsheet. "That's a generous offer, Marcus," I said, keeping my voice even. "But I'm not sure returning to my previous role would be in anyone's best interest at this point." His face flushed with barely contained anger and panic. "What do you want, then?" The question hung in the air. What did I want? Revenge, vindication? Or something more constructive? In that moment, I realized I had leverage I never expected to possess, and an opportunity to transform not just my own position but potentially the company culture. Marcus had been so eager to dismantle. I leaned forward slightly. "I think we need to discuss some significant changes before I could consider returning to FinTech Solutions." Marcus looked ready to explode, but Harold quickly interjected. "We're certainly open to discussion, Tina. Perhaps we should take a brief recess to allow everyone to collect their thoughts." As people began to stand, I caught Diane Foster's subtle nod of approval. The message was clear: I held the cards now, and GlobalBank was in no hurry to resolve this situation without ensuring their interests, and by extension mine, were fully protected. The crisis had reached its peak, and Marcus Wright's decision to treat me as a disposable budget line had backfired spectacularly. The question now was what I would do with this unexpected power, and whether FinTech Solutions could recover from a leadership decision that had brought them to the brink of financial disaster. After a tense 15-minute recess during which Marcus huddled with Andrew and several board members while shooting daggers at me with his eyes, we reconvened around the conference table. The atmosphere had shifted subtly. The initial shock had given way to a grim determination to resolve the crisis, particularly from the board members present. Harold Jenkins, the most senior board member, took control of the meeting. "Before we continue, I want to apologize personally to you, Tina. Your contributions to this company have been invaluable, and the manner of your termination was completely inconsistent with the values FinTech Solutions was built upon." Marcus stiffened beside him but remained silent. "Thank you, Harold," I replied, appreciating the sincerity in his voice. "I valued my 10 years here. That's why this situation was so unexpected." Andrew Wilson cleared his throat. "We've discussed several options during the break. Our initial proposal is to bring you back as an independent consultant, specifically focused on the GlobalBank relationship. This would satisfy the contractual requirements while giving you more flexibility." I considered this for a moment before shaking my head. "I'm not interested in a consultant position. That arrangement would leave me vulnerable to the same kind of dismissal once the immediate crisis passes." Marcus finally spoke, barely containing his frustration. "What exactly are you looking for, then?" I met his gaze directly. If I returned to FinTech, it would need to be in a role with real authority and security. Something that reflects both my value to the company and the relationships I've built with our key clients. Such as Harold prompted when I paused. "Vice President of Strategic Client Relationships," I stated clearly, reporting directly to the board, not to Marcus, with oversight of all major client accounts and their management teams. Marcus's face reddened. "That's completely..." "A reasonable starting point for discussion," Harold interrupted firmly. "What else?" I laid out my terms, methodically watching their reactions. Double my previous salary. A 3-year guaranteed contract with a substantial severance package, if terminated without cause. A seat on the executive leadership team with voting rights on client-related decisions, and a formal apology from Marcus to both me and the GlobalBank team for the disruption his actions caused. The room fell silent again. Marcus looked like he might explode, while the other executives exchanged glances that ranged from stunned to impressed. Diane Foster, who had been observing silently, allowed herself a small smile. These terms seem entirely reasonable given the circumstances. GlobalBank would be comfortable removing the payment freeze immediately upon Miss Sanchez's reinstatement under these conditions. Harold nodded slowly. The board will need to discuss the specifics, but in principle, I believe we can accommodate most of these requests. Most isn't all, I pointed out calmly. The salary and position adjustment are not issues. Andrew interjected. The reporting structure and contract terms would need board approval, but given the circumstances, I believe that's achievable. All eyes turned to Marcus, who was visibly struggling to maintain his composure. The subtext was clear, the only real obstacle was his pride. And the apology I pressed, refusing to let the most difficult requirement go unmentioned. Marcus's jaw clenched. I acted in what I believed were the company's best interests based on the information available to me. Which was incomplete because you failed to review the actual contract, Harold reminded him sharply. Marcus, the reality is that your decision has placed this company in significant jeopardy. An apology is the least of what's required here. The tension between them was palpable. Marcus represented the new direction the board had chosen, but his actions had proven dangerously reckless. Harold represented the company's original values, which had built the client relationships now at risk. Finally, Marcus gave a terse nod. I can acknowledge that mistakes were made in the process. That's not an apology, I stated flatly. And there's one more condition I haven't mentioned yet. The collective sigh in the room was almost audible. What else? Marcus asked through gritted teeth. Rachel Chen, I said. She's been managing multiple banking clients successfully for years with no recognition. I want her promoted to Senior Client Relationship Manager, reporting directly to me with a 30% salary increase. This request raised eyebrows around the table. Not for its financial implications, which were minimal compared to what was at stake, but for what it revealed about my priorities. I wasn't just negotiating for myself. I was using my leverage to elevate someone else who deserved recognition. Harold actually smiled. That seems entirely reasonable, assuming Miss Chen's performance records support it. They do, I assured him. Review them yourself if you have any doubts. After another hour of negotiation over specific details, we reached an agreement in principle. I would return to FinTech Solutions the following Monday as the newly created Vice President of Strategic Client Relationships, with Rachel as my second-in-command. My compensation package would be finalized by the board within 24 hours, and Marcus would issue formal apologies to both me and the GlobalBank team. As we prepared to conclude the meeting, Diane Foster slid a document across the table to Andrew. This is a memorandum of understanding outlining GlobalBank's position. Once Ms. Sanchez is officially reinstated, with the agreed-upon terms, we'll remove the payment freeze and continue our partnership. Harold signed the document immediately, not even bothering to consult Marcus. We'll have the board ratify Miss Sanchez's new position and contract by tomorrow. You have my personal guarantee. As the meeting adjourned, Harold asked me to stay behind. Once everyone else had filed out, he spoke candidly. That was impressively handled, Tina. You could have demanded much more or simply walked away and left us to deal with the fallout. I never wanted to hurt the company, Harold. I helped build these client relationships. I just wanted the respect and recognition I've earned. He nodded thoughtfully. Marcus has brought some needed financial discipline to our operations, but clearly at a cost to our culture and institutional knowledge. Your new role will help restore some balance. He paused, and bringing Rachel into the conversation, that showed real leadership. She deserves the opportunity, I said simply. And if I'm going to rebuild these client relationships properly, I need people I can trust. 2 days later, my new contract was finalized. The following Monday, I walked back into the FinTech Solutions building, not as a disgraced former employee, but as a newly appointed vice president with a corner office and a seat at the executive table. The first company-wide meeting with my new title was a study in contrasts. Marcus introduced me with forced politeness, outlining my new responsibilities without mentioning the circumstances that led to my return. But when Elizabeth Morgan and the GlobalBank team arrived for our reconciliation meeting that afternoon, he delivered the promised apology with surprising humility, acknowledging that he had underestimated the importance of relationship management in our business model. As we left that meeting with the GlobalBank contract securely back on track, Elizabeth pulled me aside with a conspiratorial smile. I knew that contract clause would come in handy someday, just didn't expect it to be quite so dramatic. "You planned for this possibility?" I asked, amazed. She shrugged. "I've been in business long enough to know that good people sometimes get caught in bad management decisions. I just made sure we had a safety net in place, for both our sakes." In one tumultuous week, I had gone from unemployed to more empowered than ever before. The experience had been painful, but the reversal was sweeter for it. Sometimes being reduced to a line on a budget is just the beginning of a much more interesting story. 3 months after my dramatic return, FinTech Solutions had undergone subtle but significant changes. My new position gave me visibility and authority I'd never imagined possible during my previous tenure. More importantly, it allowed me to implement improvements I had advocated for years. The most noticeable change was in Marcus Wright himself. The experience had humbled him visibly. Where he had once made unilateral decisions based solely on spreadsheet data, he now sought input from department heads before making major changes. Our weekly executive meetings, once dominated by his monologues about cost-cutting, now included substantive discussions about client needs and employee retention. The GlobalBank situation was educational, he admitted, during one of our one-on-one meetings. The acknowledgement clearly cost him some pride, which made it all the more significant. "Financial efficiency and client relationships aren't mutually exclusive," I replied, keeping my tone constructive rather than triumphant. "We can achieve both, with the right approach." Our professional relationship remained strained but functional. Marcus respected my authority regarding client matters less from personal regard than from recognition of the disaster my termination had nearly caused. For my part, I focused on results rather than revenge, determined to prove my value through performance rather than contractual leverage. Rachel thrived in her new role as Senior Client Relationship Manager. With proper recognition and compensation, her natural talents flourished. She reorganized the entire client management team, implementing standardized communication protocols while maintaining personalized service. 3 of our smaller banking clients increased their service packages within her first month, attracted by the improved responsiveness. "You didn't just save your own position," she told me over lunch one day. "You changed the trajectory of the entire department. People actually want to come to work again." The most rewarding aspect was my strengthened relationship with GlobalBank. Far from being damaged by the disruption, our partnership deepened. Elizabeth and I developed a 3-year technology roadmap that would integrate our software more comprehensively into their operations. 2 months after my reinstatement, she approved an additional project worth $50 million that had previously been on hold. The board nearly had a heart attack when I presented the new contract I told Elizabeth during one of our regular coffee meetings. Marcus actually smiled when he signed it. She laughed. "Nothing improves a relationship with the CEO like bringing in new revenue. But we both know this new project wouldn't have happened if you hadn't returned. Trust can't be transferred in a handover memo." During a private dinner to celebrate the new project, Elizabeth finally shared the full story behind the Tina clause that had saved my career. "It wasn't spontaneous," she admitted, swirling her wine thoughtfully. 3 years before our contract with FinTech GlobalBank, had a terrible experience with another vendor. We'd built the entire implementation around their project lead, who was suddenly fired in a cost-cutting measure. The replacement had no understanding of our specific needs. The project failed catastrophically, costing us millions. "So you created insurance against history repeating itself," I realized. She nodded. "When I saw how central you were to the FinTech relationship, I insisted on that clause. Thomas understood immediately. He'd seen similar situations in his career. I never really expected to invoke it, but thank you, I said sincerely. Not just for the clause, but for standing firm when it mattered. Back at FinTech, the company culture was gradually recovering. Marcus's aggressive cost-cutting had slowed, though not stopped entirely. He still brought valuable financial discipline, but now balanced with greater consideration for institutional knowledge and client relationships. In my department, I implemented changes that benefited both the company and our clients. We developed more comprehensive onboarding procedures for new client managers, ensuring relationships wouldn't be dependent on single individuals in the future. I established regular cross-functional meetings between technical teams and client representatives, breaking down the silos that had previously caused communication failures. 6 months after my return, the quarterly results exceeded projections by 12%. During the executive presentation, Marcus acknowledged that the improved client retention and expanded contracts had contributed significantly to the positive outcome. Our enhanced relationship management approach has yielded measurable financial benefits, he stated, using the formal language he preferred for business discussions. The data supports continued investment in this area. Coming from Marcus, this was high praise indeed. Harold caught my eye across the conference table and gave me a subtle nod of approval. The experiment was working, proving that valuing people and relationships could drive financial success as effectively as cost-cutting. Even more satisfying was watching other executives advocate for valued team members when Marcus proposed cuts in their departments. They'd learned from my experience that sometimes the most important assets didn't appear clearly on balance sheets. People began speaking up about the hidden value certain roles brought to the company, often preventing short-sighted decisions before they occurred. You've created a protective ripple effect, Rachel observed after one particularly contentious budget meeting where the marketing director successfully defended her team against proposed cuts. Everyone saw what happened with GlobalBank. No one wants to be the next cautionary tale. In October, 7 months after my termination and reinstatement, I received a company-wide recognition award for outstanding contribution to business growth. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Marcus, who presented the award with professional courtesy, if not genuine warmth. Tina Sanchez has demonstrated exceptional skill in developing and maintaining client relationships that drive sustainable revenue, he announced to the assembled employees. Her work with GlobalBank has become a model for our client management approach company-wide. As I accepted the award, I caught sight of Rachel in the audience, giving me a subtle thumbs up. We both knew the real victory wasn't the acrylic trophy or the bonus check that accompanied it. It was the vindication of our people-first philosophy in a business environment that too often reduced human beings to budget calculations. Sometimes being erased as a line item becomes the first step in writing an entirely new chapter. 1 year after the day Marcus Wright called me into his office and uttered those fateful words, "You're just a line on my budget," I found myself sitting in that same office, now occupied by a different CEO. Marcus had resigned 3 months earlier, accepting a position at a larger financial institution where rumor had it he was implementing a more balanced approach to leadership based on his experiences at FinTech. Sarah Mitchell, our new CEO, had been promoted from within. A deliberate choice by the board to maintain the company culture that had been so painstakingly restored. With her background in both technology and client services, Sarah represented the integration of technical excellence and relationship management that had become FinTech's renewed identity. "It's been quite a year," Sarah observed, reviewing the annual performance reports. GlobalBank has expanded their contract twice, and 3 other major clients have followed their lead. Your department is responsible for nearly 30% of our growth this quarter. "The team deserves the credit," I replied, genuinely proud of what we'd built. "Rachel has been extraordinary in developing our new client management protocols." Sarah nodded. "That's why we're implementing them company-wide next month. The board is particularly impressed with the retention metrics since you took over." As I left the meeting, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The initial shock and humiliation of being fired had been profound. For weeks afterward, I had questioned my value both professionally and personally. The experience had shaken my confidence in ways I hadn't anticipated. The healing began gradually, first through the validation of Elizabeth's unwavering support and the contractual clause that recognized my specific contribution. Then, through the negotiated return that acknowledged my worth in concrete terms. But the deeper healing came from the work itself, from building something valuable from the ashes of what had been broken. Rachel met me by the elevator, ready for our weekly team lunch. "You look contemplative," she observed as we rode down to the lobby. "Just thinking about everything that's changed. Hard to believe it's been a year since I was escorted out of this building." She shook her head. "And now you're practically running the place. There's a screenplay in there somewhere." We laughed, but her comment highlighted an important truth. My professional identity had been transformed by the experience. Where I had once defined success as securing and maintaining client relationships, I now saw a broader purpose in reshaping how businesses value the human elements of their operations. Over lunch with our team, now expanded to 15 client relationship managers, I shared some reflections on our anniversary, careful to focus on the positive changes rather than the drama that precipitated them. "The most valuable lesson I've learned," I told them, "is that relationships aren't intangible assets that can't be measured. They translate directly to client retention, expansion, and referrals. Our job is to make that value visible and quantifiable without reducing it to mere numbers." Later that afternoon, Elizabeth called with news that GlobalBank was considering an even larger expansion of our services into their international divisions. The board practically threw a parade when I mentioned the possibility, I told her. "Quite a change from a year ago when they nearly lost everything." "That's what happens when companies learn to value their real assets," Elizabeth replied. "Speaking of which, how is your protégé doing?" "Rachel. She's amazing. Just developed a new client onboarding system that reduces implementation time by 30%. She's presenting it to the board next week." "That's what I love about you, Tina," Elizabeth said warmly. "You didn't just fight for yourself. You created space for others to grow too." After we hung up, I walked through the client management department, observing the teams in action. Where once there had been anxiety and isolation, there was now collaboration and purpose. People weren't looking over their shoulders, wondering if their positions would be eliminated in the next cost-cutting measure. Instead, they were focused on creating value that would make such cuts unthinkable. The painful experience of being reduced to a budget line had transformed not just my career, but my understanding of leadership. True leadership isn't about controlling resources or maximizing short-term profits. It's about recognizing the full value each person brings, the relationships they build, the knowledge they hold, the innovation they create when they feel secure and appreciated. In my new office, I kept a small framed quote on my desk. "People are not line items." It served as a daily reminder of both the painful lesson and the positive change it ultimately created. That evening, as I prepared for a presentation to potential new banking clients, I reflected on how the worst professional experience of my life had ultimately led to the best. Being fired had forced me to recognize my own value in ways that comfortable employment never had. The journey from humiliation to empowerment had given me a resilience and confidence I might never have discovered otherwise. Sometimes the greatest strength emerges from our moments of greatest vulnerability. Sometimes being erased from one story allows us to write a better one. And sometimes the line items that seem most expendable turn out to be the foundation upon which everything else depends. What line item in your life once seemed insignificant but turned out to be essential? Have you ever been underestimated only to prove your true value? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might need this reminder of their own immeasurable worth. Remember, in both business and life, the true value of human connection can never be reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet.